Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Cbts Onyx CIO Information Exchange. The topic of today's webinar is security risk in times of crisis. I'll be your moderator today. I'm Hope Thackeray. I'm the Director of Security Programs at Cbts. I've been at Cbts about 5 years. It'll be 6 years next week. And I have a range of responsibilities here: third-party risk management. I manage all of our auditors to obtain and maintain our security certifications, HIPAA, PCI, SOC 1, SOC 2. And then all this year, we will maintain 22 different certifications across our environments. My team's pretty busy. Some housekeeping topics for today. During the webinar, all the attendees will be muted and the video will be turned off, and that will help us ensure better quality issues with the connections. If you have questions during the presentation, use your chat button at the bottom of the screen in the middle, and at the end of the presentation, I will be looking for the questions that will be most likely to stump our panelists, because that would give me great joy. If you don't see a chat panel, click the chat icon at the bottom of the main WebEx screen. So we'll get started now. Introduce Brandon Bowman. He's the VP of our Strategic Services at Cbts.
Thank you, Hope. Hello, I'm Brandon. I lead the Strategic Services organization for Cbts and Onyx. This organization includes all services we provide across communications. That includes voice, data, network services. In addition, cloud and compute areas, both traditional and public cloud compute-based infrastructure. And last, but certainly not least, security, which includes products, consulting, and other services. From the collective team, we thank you for joining today across the U.S. and Canada. The goal of this meeting is simple: sharing information, providing perspectives, and communicating in these uncertain times. From our side, we're representing 4 businesses: Cincinnati Bell, Hawaiian Telecom, Cbts, and Onyx Canada. Each of these areas represented this morning have unique security needs. Also, each company has security resources and expertise that are part of supporting our businesses and our customers. We have a commitment to knowledge sharing and working together to solve today's challenges. And with that, I will quickly pass back over to Hope to get us officially started.
Thanks, Brandon. So today's agenda, we're just finishing up the welcome and the meeting goals. And now we're going to go through the presenters and give you a little bit of their background. Then Leo Cronin, our Chief Security Officer, is going to talk a little bit about COVID security preparedness. And then we'll hear from Justin Hall, Ryan Hamrick, and Moby Khan, and then we'll open it up for questions. So we'll start with Leo Cronin, the Vice President and Chief Security Officer, and a colleague of mine for nearly 20 years. Leo?
Well, yeah, thank you, Hope. Hope everyone can hear me. Unprecedented times, as Brandon had mentioned, and I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy out there. I don't think this is anything that anyone really has anticipated. It's been a challenge for businesses, organizations, IT services, IT departments, and security groups as well. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about how we prepared ahead of time, not for this specific event, but for events like this. And we have a BCP team, if you can move to the next slide, a BCP team that was established essentially to look at different scenarios that would impact the business. And we're using a framework that is used a lot in the telecommunications industry based on FEMA's NIMS incident response program. So we've identified some virtual logical roles within the organization that we would get together during different types of crises. Workforce interruption is one of those. Of course, we anticipated pandemic type issues, but nothing on this scale whatsoever. But I would like to say that the framework that we put in place has served us pretty well. It has given us an ability to be very flexible and adaptable and really separate the operational response from what has to be done in the rest of the organization at the executive level, communications, legal, et cetera, et cetera. So a couple of things that are really important in these types of scenarios, and I'm sure a lot of people have been finding this out, is speed, being able to get the decisions and do things quickly, as well as communication. And I would say I feel really good about Cincinnati Bell, CBTS, HT's communications plans around this. They are keeping everyone well informed. Employees, we're reaching out to our vendors and our partners, and that is really one of the top priorities in our response to this, as well as looking at ways on how we can help others out there through this crisis. So the other thing that we're finding out too is that sometimes from these types of scenarios comes innovation. So when we look at new ways of doing remote access or addressing certain security risks, we're looking at new ways of essentially making that happen. So now I want to pivot into some of the security group's core responsibilities on this. So I mentioned we have the BCP program. Well, one of my directors is actually the alternate incident commander for this particular exercise, which really coordinates a lot of those teams that I mentioned before. And the reason why we're doing that is because we have already a lot of interfaces into local, state, and federal emergency management services, just on an ongoing basis from a physical security and cybersecurity perspective. So it was natural for that individual to step up and work with the operations team to make that happen. And the operations team is truly virtual across all parts of the business. So CBTS, the telephone company, Cincinnati Bell, as well as Hawaiian Telecom and Onyx. So, that's working out pretty well. I would say that the team is getting into a groove where the statuses are pretty quick and everyone knows what the role is. And I think we're moving through this as best as we can. It's a very difficult situation for everyone, I understand. The other thing that security really had to do pretty quickly in all this is help the business make some remote access decisions about how it wanted to enable capabilities that weren't there before. For instance, we have network operations teams that normally use applications inside our buildings on our lands that we needed to figure out pretty quickly how to make those applications and environments remote. We also had to extend this to some of our third parties as well, because a lot of them did not have work from home programs, especially in locations in the world like India and the Philippines. So we had to look at different ways and work with those partners on putting forward a secure way of doing remote access. And the other big thing that we anticipated a little bit, but we had to put it into motion, was how were we going to do security operations, both physical and cyber, in a work from home environment. So although we have really good technology, we have people who can get onto the land through VPNs, would the applications work and would the experience work so that we could actually do our jobs from home? And, I'm happy to report that that's going pretty well. There are some bumps in the road, but one of the things is some things have slowed down. So we can take more time to analyze and look at alarms and alerts and things of that nature. So, but it has worked very well for us overall. The other thing that I'm doing is making sure that I keep in touch with my team. I have daily statuses with my management team at the end of the day just to find out what's going on. And I've established a weekly all-hands meeting, which I'm sure a lot of people probably have done already out there, to make sure that they're staying in touch with people, even in fairly fun ways as well. So a couple of concerns, and I'm going to let Justin kind of talk about this, is really the threats that are out there. We're concerned with increased phishing scams and just malware activity across the environment. We're spending a lot more time, as I mentioned, monitoring the environment versus, just sitting there and doing some projects to move the security program forward. But we haven't really seen a major uptick in shenanigans out there. But we do anticipate as this thing moves forward, we're going to see some more activity that we're going to have to respond to. If you want to flip slides, please. So just want to talk about a couple of things that have worked for us to position us for this type of a crisis. We're using certificates for multi-factor authentication, which really ties, that second form of authentication to the device that we give our individuals that has our bill, our security capabilities on it. And that has made deploying work from home a lot easier because we just have to build a machine, give it to an individual, and they're ready to go. So that has worked out pretty well. The other thing is back in 2017, 2018, although we didn't anticipate this particular event, we spent a lot of time on Office 365 and Salesforce security so that we could anticipate a work from outside of the office's environment and still maintain the security that we were looking for as if people were wired into the office. So the other thing that we did over the past couple of years is consolidated and simplified our security controls from the perimeter on to the endpoints. We decided to consolidate on the Cisco security stack, and that has been working very well for us because we have visibility into people's endpoints as well as into data security related issues, regardless of where people are at home or in the offices or if they're traveling about. And then we have taken an approach over the past couple of years just to log as much as we can and monitor as much of the security environment as we can, including our SaaS applications out there. So we partner with MSSPs. They're really all the partners of Cbts, and also we have some internal capabilities as well. And as BAU has slowed down, as I mentioned, we have shifted more activity into monitoring the environment to look for risks. So a couple of things that we're anticipating to get back into focus on is really more discussions with the business about third-party and partner access as business conditions change. I think for the most part, most of that work is completed, but it is something that we do have dialogues occasionally on edge cases where people need to get access into systems or data. And then in another area is, and I think this is something that we constantly worry about from a security perspective, is email security. Because a lot of people are at home, they spend a lot of time in email, so we need to continue on our project work to improve that email infrastructure. And then lastly, and this goes back to the BCP program, is really trying to anticipate more unknown unknowns. Because there are some things out there that we're keeping an eye on, but if they do occur, it makes it even more difficult to respond into a crisis like that. So we're continuing to run the BCP program. We're continuing to implement security, talk to the business, gather the groups together to make sure that we have the right level of security posture out there. And we'll get through this. I'm convinced. We're doing a good job. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Justin, who's probably going to dive into the specific cyber threats that we've seen out there. And I appreciate you hopping on the call and look forward to any discussions later on.
So first, Justin, could we have you introduce yourself, you and Ryan and Moby?
Yeah, certainly. Good to be with you guys this morning. My name is Justin Hall. I am Director of Security Consulting here at CBTS. Been here for 15 years. I get to do strategy conversations with customers about the security problems they're trying to solve and try to figure out ways to do it. I also lead our assessment and pen testing practice. So I got a couple of sharp folks like Ryan who go out and serve customers and help them mature their security programs. Today, I'm going to actually let Ryan talk a little bit later about some of the specific threats that we've seen. My focus, I wanted to nail down on a term that Leo used earlier. We're very lucky to have Leo here as our CISO, and running our security program, keeping our business safe. He talked about anticipating threats. And I want to talk a little bit about how the customers I'm talking with have fielded this crisis and how it's informing the risk management stuff that they're doing. And if you're on the phone and you are a security practitioner, you're a security leader, and risk management is not something that you're talking about all that frequently, my hope is that this conversation today and also the crisis that we're in now starts to move you towards that direction. We really think that a good, strong security program in 2020 needs to be doing sound risk management. And so what does that look like, and how does this pandemic inform our practice there? The first is that word anticipate, right? We don't need a crystal ball, but we certainly need to be able to think outside of the box, not just what has our business gone through and how has it adversely impacted us, but what could it go through? And how do you do that as a security practitioner? I think it's easy to look at your own business operations and say, well, what would hurt us? What would cause problems? What would sabotage our ability to operate, to make payroll, to build whatever widget or serve whatever customer or deliver whatever service? And that's easy to do. It's not as easy to think outside the box. Nobody, I think, a year ago would have had, global pandemic on their list of risks and the thing that would sabotage their ability to run their business. So there are things you can predict and there are things that you can't, but it's important to get creative and start to try to think outside the box. And I keep saying think outside the box. How do you do that? Well, you get feeders, right? Your risk management program needs inputs. Those inputs could be, look at the other folks in my industry. What are they struggling with? What have caused them to struggle or have problems? Look at the linchpins of our business and the times where we've had problems. How have we reacted to them, and what's the root cause of those things? So all of those feed into anticipation. The next is prioritizing risk. And so we need to not just stack rank, based on what we think is, really bad for us, but actually try to make some material decisions based on real measurements. Now, I see businesses all the time try to put dollar figures next to risk and say, all right, if a ransomware attack, takes out our employees' ability to use our local area network or their machines or some service, it's going to cost us X or Y or Z dollars a day. That's a hard thing to do, to try to figure out. If you can get there, it's great. I've worked for customers that have, would be able to tell you down to the minute, they're manufacturing customers, they have a shop floor, they would be able to tell you down to the minute, if this machine goes down, here's how much it's going to cost our business. So if you can get there, that's great. But if not, have some kind of measuring system that you can use to tell, ransomware attack from phishing attack, from global pandemic, from somebody defaces our website or somebody loses a laptop. All of those risks you should be able to stack rank them and say, this is more of a concern. And what that leads to then is the effort that you put forth. How do you decide where you're going to put your energy, your time, your resources in developing risk treatments and compensating controls? And finally, learning from the stuff that has gone on, right? Looking back, and my hope is for everybody on the call, at the end of this crisis, you're able to look back and understand, how did this, one, change your business operations, and two, how does this inform how you perceive risk in the organization going forward? Because it needs to change. Obviously, you've heard this is unprecedented and unpredictable times we're living in every 5 minutes from every news organization. It's driving me crazy too. It's true in that it's going to change how we run our businesses. It's going to change how we predict and deal with risk. And so we need to have those lessons learned conversations after every adverse event that we go through, whether it's something big like a pandemic or something small like somebody successfully phished one of our employees. So I'd like, again, everybody, if you're listening and do security at your organization, to start thinking about doing these things, and start now, right? Maybe you got some more free time on your hands right now. Maybe start developing your risk inventory and start adding things to that list that you might not have added a year ago. And then prioritize them using some kind of a measurement system, And then when we're all through this and the smoke is cleared, and we're all sort of settling back to normal, maybe we can have some conversations with other folks in the business about how does this change what we do. So that's all I've got, and I'd like to turn it back to Hope, and we'll move on to Ryan.
So first of all, I want to remind everybody that please submit some questions through chat so that at the end of this we can get some more information from these gentlemen. The next person we're going to hear from is Ryan Hammock. He's a Principal Information Security Consultant with CBTS. Ryan, can you give us a little bit of your background?
Sure, absolutely. Been working in the security industry for, since 2007. And I've been focused more on the consulting side. I work for Justin's team in the security services portion of our business, and my role is that of a pen tester and an advisory capacity with customers, talking about how to mature their security programs, take what they have today, and become better, do better at what they do. So what I wanted to talk to you today about was some of the recent security attacks. We've got this whole weird, strange world that we've all talked about already today that's going on out there, but security attacks are still happening. It's still lots of threats out there. And one of the threats that has come up that some of you may or may not have heard of is something called Zoom bombing. Zoom is a video teleconferencing service. A lot of schools and governments have transitioned to using that for a lot of their meetings. And there is a risk there around the video teleconferencing services called video teleconferencing hijacking. It's where an uninvited guest would enter a Zoom meeting that hasn't been properly configured as private, and they perform any number of offensive actions during the meeting. It's gone from shouting offensive terms or phrases to putting up offensive videos in the background so that everyone has to see that. New news on this as of today, Zoom is actually being sued by one of their shareholders for perceived lack of security focus in the past. One of the things that they are being accused of is not thinking ahead and putting end-to-end encryption on their video teleconferencing services. So that's some of the stuff out there. And there's some ways to help against this on Zoom and other video teleconferencing platforms. Includes don't make meetings public. Make sure your meetings are set to private, and you invite the attendees purposefully. You set a meeting password or configure the room as a waiting room, which allows the host to specifically allow guests to join. They specifically accept guests. Don't share the link to a meeting via publicly available social media. Keep people out. Manage screen sharing options, such as using a host-only mode, much like we're doing here with a panelist and attendee kind of configuration. And finally, make sure your software is updated. Your Zoom software that you're using is kept up to date with the latest and greatest. One of the things that Zoom has transitioned to was previously it did not by default require you to use a password for access, and they have changed that with their latest update in their software. You need to have a default configuration is to configure a password for attendance. The next thing that's made news recently is Marriott hack. Now, this is not 2 years ago. This is current. Marriott, again, has exposed the information of approximately 5.2 million guests. This includes their names, home addresses, birthdays, gender, email, and phone numbers. Some of it like the preferences as to what kind of rooms they stay in and that sort of stuff. This was detected in February, but they believe that the initial intrusion dates back to mid-January, and it's performed via compromised credentials of 2 franchise property employees. They sent out a notification to everybody on March 31st about it. So there's some questions around, well, you detected in February, you didn't tell anyone until March 31st. What has happened in that meantime? It's important to note that one of the things that could have helped them keep this from happening was requiring multi-factor authentication on that application in question. It was not a third-party application, but I believe it was more like a SaaS application where the franchise employees could use a username and a password and log in. If they had multi-factor authentication on that application, stealing a password wouldn't have done much. It is good that Marriott was able to detect the breach on their own using what I assume is to at least be log correlation, or maybe even perhaps UEBA, or User and Entity Behavior Analytics, which says, hey, these people that usually don't access these resources are suddenly accessing these resources in great quantities. And that's how the information was detected being misused. And finally, in this day and age, phishing is still an issue. It's while we have not detected an uptick in scams on our Cincinnati Bell CBTS configurations, there has been an uptick out there in the global, from a global perspective, that there are scams related to coronavirus. It'll be one of the things that was pointed out was there was a fake a map, coronavirus infection map out there that would actually install some sort of malware on your system. So you would get emailed a link and, hey, click on this, and you would see a new map, and then you would get some malware on your system. It's important also to note that phishing scams are not just performed these days via email. More and more phishing happens via mobile applications and SMS messages. You get a lot of app notifications that would actually be a phishing notification from a somewhat malicious application that you may have installed on your mobile device. So it's important to control that from a mobile device management perspective as an organization. From our perspective, we actually do phishing campaigns as well to help out other companies figure out where they could increase some of their knowledge. We've seen that a lot of success happens when phishing campaigns offer some sort of reward, typically like a gift card of some kind. One that I've personally done that had more success than I expected was offered a $500 gift card for filling out a survey, a $500 Amazon gift card. A lot of clicks on that one, and a lot more form submissions than I think probably should have happened. But the greater the value of the gift card, the more likely that person is to click on the link and at least give it a shot. What could be the worst thing that could happen? The most effective control we've found against this, outside of the technical controls that you can put in there, is user awareness training. We continue to harp on that as a key component to stopping phishing of all these different kinds. Make sure your user awareness training continues, and you saddle that along with the technical controls. All right, that's all I have for you. Hope, back to you, and thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. So next we have Moby Khan. He is the Director of Information Security at Onyx. Moby, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. Hope everybody is keeping safe and learning to deal with this new realm that we're dealing with. So my prayers are for everybody out there. I run a security practice within Canada. The primary role that I play is to understand the clients that we are working with and what is their specific requirement. It could be threat and risk assessment to what my colleagues are earlier saying. By the way, I'm based in Toronto, Canada. And threat risk assessment, any kind of anomaly, any compliance, any requirements within law enforcement, healthcare, privacy needs, any of those to understand how it impacts their industry, what are some of the things, solutions that we can provide them. So I play that role within Onyx, working very closely with our sales teams and absolutely working with our clients and industry leaders. So that is my role. What I want to talk about today is how this COVID-19 is impacting our workplace environment. And when I say the workplace environment, working from home is not a new concept. Most of us who travel have flexibility to work from home. What is different with the COVID-19 and this pandemic is what we are getting exposed to. What safety containment measures that we need to put in place, not only from cybersecurity, but on a personal level. So that being said, within cyber world, we know that human factor is a major factor within any breaches or any cyber exploits. That the human factor is a major factor in it. I mean, I know there are technology breaches, the way people get into your system. There's a brute force, remote, signature reading, things like that. There are a lot of things that I've come across, and I've seen how people actually get into your system. But human factor, if you look at both COVID, what is the main thing that we're doing right now is isolating ourselves, and it is a human link which is going to stop spread of this infection. Is no different than how we see a malware or any other thing spread globally. And what we're talking about Marriott incident, and I can give you a list of this. We definitely have limited time here. But coming back to how is changing the paradigm, I mean, one of the key things is organizations around the world, especially in USA and Canada, realizing more and more that they took a lot of things for granted in terms of how people work from home. There is no password policy. There is no reinforcing how actually what you are allowed to do. So there's a policy around it from home-based workers. I'm working with a lot of doctors, which they're like using telemedicine, for example, treating their patients from home. They never had a policy around it, how we should do a better job, not exposing privacy of private information. You look at law enforcement, a lot of police officers, all these guys are forced to work from home because they want to protect at least 20% of the workforce, that if people are in the front lines not doing well and getting sick of this infection, they at least have people who are in isolation will come out and start supporting while the others are getting better. So helping clients with some of those things to accept the new reality and building some few programs around it. So those are some of the things that I think are very, very critical from how the landscape is changing and what challenges that we face. One of the things that I'm working with right now and actually building with a couple of our clients is a process around how you are doing like protecting your passwords. What websites or what methods, what kind of a web browser, applications, all of those, and there's a checklist that where they stand, and definitely having somebody coordinating that, a quarterback who's a liaison between the organization policies and procedures, and enforcement, and working with the people who are working remotely. Because imagine that we are going through this crisis right now, and one thing which the attackers we are seeing is from revenue coming in, people getting spam on their text messages, emails, that, hey, we realized that was going on, so here's the link, you can apply for $20,000 loan, and it's legit. I mean, you can mask everything, and you click on it, boom, you're compromised. So these are some of the things that I have on my plate, and I would love to talk more about it in a Q&A session, that how we can help you with this changing in a very dynamic environment. There's so many pieces in place and things are changing rapidly. The best practices in this area, from password to personal hygiene, computer hygiene, methodologies, building policies around it, from work from home. And what are we doing? So the unique things to help our clients, some of the things I mentioned earlier. So absolutely, be more than happy to answer some questions later on. And it's a pleasure to be talking to you.
Thank you, Moby. I do want to remind our guests that you are able to ask questions through the chat function. We have a couple questions that have come in already, and I'm going to start with those. So with the activity surrounding COVID-19, has the panel seen any specific manufacturer's product shine or confirm the need for the product due to the need for remote workers, analytic needs, etc.? So are there any specific products that you've seen work well, or that you've seen the need to be confirmed because of the work from home. And I will direct that to Justin.
Yeah, I feel like most of the focus has been on finding strong VPN solutions and strong video, teleconferencing solutions. Most folks have already had some kind of a remote messaging collaboration tool set, Office 365 or something like that in place. So none of that was new, but I think that the big shift for most new remote workers has been accessing, applications and services remotely, stuff that might have been cloud-facing already, but it's been interesting. The challenge that we've seen has been folks that have had to rush to push and make some previously internal-only applications internet-facing. I would say from a security perspective, looking at like CASB solutions as an example, Cloud Access Security Broker. Basically, these are tools that make sure that your users are properly behaving and handling data in SaaS applications. Is a long and short of it. Basically, they're tools to say enforce policy about how data is handled, how access and tools are handled with SaaS applications like your Salesforces or your Office 365s or your Workdays, those types of applications. So I think there's a lot of groundswell around adopting some of those solutions. The other one I'll highlight is multi-factor authentication, which we touched on before, where I mentioned trying to protect credentials that have been stolen. Attackers are certainly ramping up attacks against exposed interfaces, applications that require authentication. So web apps, collaboration applications, messaging applications, and remote access. And we think multi-factor authentication would be great on all of those. And so we work with a bunch of different partners in those spaces. CASB, we work with Netscope and Zscaler and Microsoft and Palo Alto and Checkpoint and a few others. And then with multi-factor authentication, we work with Duo, we work with Okta, we work with Gemalto and Micro Focus and Microsoft. And so there are plenty of options out there. If any of those are places where you're falling short or you feel like, hey, we're having problems with credential theft and people stealing creds and getting into unauthorized access into other people's accounts, either VPN or webmail, things like that, we'd love to help you try to find the right solution for you.
Hey, Hope, this is Leo. I would like to offer some perspective there, too. One of the things that I think is also important, or at least has helped us during this, is DNS security and providing a layer of capability for roaming clients. So when people are outside of the offices and off of our lands and not necessarily going through our perimeter controls, they are still being protected with anti-malware like Umbrella. We use that. We also use an EDR, which has cloud visibility when people are off the network. So I think, especially in this world, and Justin and Ryan, you can chime in on this, but I think that was definitely something that gave us some better visibility when we had the entire organization moving to home. Yeah,
it's all about protecting those assets as they leave the nest, as it were, right? As they leave the safety and security of the protected enterprise network and sit instead on the small home network, maybe without the defenses that you would have had before of content filtering, or you can't trust it. Even if you tell employees, hey, you can't VPN them all the time simply because we don't have the capacity. Well, how do you protect those employees then that are trying to access the internet? Do you have something on the asset itself that can enforce some control, that can restrict access to malicious sites? And yeah, DNS security through something like Umbrella, which is not a product we've seen really out of a ton of other vendors. That's a really great solution. And we've had a lot of success with it here internally.
So,
great, thank you.
Want to point one thing. Having 24/7 monitoring. I mean, remote users, when you're outside the environment, it's very hard to monitor if there's policy or something around it where you're actually monitoring. those aspects, like reinforcing training and monitoring 24/7, those remote users can go a long way to what Justin and Leo talked about earlier to enforce some of the controls in there. So I would definitely big proponent of some sort of monitoring for those remote users.
Absolutely. Good point, Moby.
All right. Let's go to the next question. We have a couple more questions. Does the panel feel the pandemic will lead to a greater need for IoT analytics due to the expansion need for speed on testing, medical equipment analytics, and remote extension of resources, et cetera?
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say, yeah, you know, the healthcare customers that we've talked to have, you know, their business has not slowed down at all, right? They're picking up, and so they're still networked enterprises. They still have, you know, medical devices, and most of them, I think, struggle honestly with, you know, making sure that medical devices and non-traditional machines, IoT machines, or, you know, OT infrastructure remains hardened, right? And so if you were sending your non-essential personnel at home, you know, I think a lot of times, as we mentioned before, visibility into activity from that set of devices is challenging to keep up, and you know, understanding how to protect them is a challenge. So yeah, you know, I haven't seen a lot of the healthcare customers we've worked with heavy into the analytics side of that environment. Certainly they've taken, I think, more of a traditional approach of asset inventory, device profiling, and you know, vulnerability management practices, but it certainly could happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing to mention is, you know, with this current pandemic, one of the key tools that they use are ventilators, and the issue there is that you have to ensure that the ventilators are operating at the right capacity all the time, and the best way to do that and stay isolated from the highly contagious patient is to be able to remote monitor that ventilator. So that's a particular case study in making sure that the device that you have to have connected to a network to be able to remote monitor the capabilities of the device and the effectiveness of the device. You have to make sure that that device has been hardened in some way or is otherwise controlled. One of the things I'll recommend for instance, for manufacturing companies that have devices that you can't update past Windows XP because it runs this critical manufacturing control, is to put compensating controls around it. So you don't want to harden a device so much that you can't use it, and a ventilator is a perfect example of that sort of thing. So you want to have compensating controls. You want to make sure you've got you're only allowing access to the specific ports that provide you the information that you need, as you're firewalling that off, and you're ensuring that cannot be accessed from anywhere. Network segmentation. You want to make sure that can't be accessed from any other network segment that does not require, from a business need, access to that.
That's great.
Yeah. Just want to chime in. One of the things that I'm working with a couple of hospitals here. I actually had a long conference call yesterday in Toronto. Location-based services and where the machines, these ventilators, and other critical equipment is. I mean, it's getting to a capacity in Toronto and other places, but one of the things they're using is enforcing some of those things. So the first focus was to get the PPE in place, but now they're realizing that these critical machines, assets, even they're wearing RFID tracks on personnel to locate the physicians and their mobile devices, location-based services. So they're hardening the security on those devices. When in a critical moment when they need a physician, nurse, or a practitioner, anesthesiologist, respirator control, they are actually now looking into an investment where technology is a huge factor in enabling and saving lives, not only doctors and skill sets. So I'm seeing a lot of effort and progress in that area.
So I have a the third question that we have, and we kind of addressed it a little bit, Justin, but maybe you and your team can maybe boil it down to maybe the top 5 things. Are there any specific actions end users should take to help their organization stay secure with so many working from home who may not have before? So maybe just kind of remind folks of what you would do. What would be the first 5 things you would do, or the top 5?
This was users, right? This is things users should do, not necessarily, security people, right?
Yeah, it says end users should be taking to help their organization.
Yeah, that's great. So first and foremost, I would say, follow the guidance from the security team and pay attention and read it carefully, right? So we've gotten guidance from Leo and his team to say, hey, this is what you should be doing. This is how you should access these critical applications. This is when you should VPN in, and when you do, you are going to, follow these procedures and then log off when you're done to make sure that you're following, good corporate policy. That's number 1. Number 2, keep your machine up to date. So depending on your organization, you may or may not get patches when you're on the VPN. You may only get patched when you're on VPN. You may get patches, remotely. We may be here for a while in this situation. So I think if you see update notifications come up, patch your machine. Don't let it sit. I have to fuss at some of the people in my family where I'll go to my mother-in-law's house and I'll see, on her machine, oh, you've got an OS update sitting here and you're about 6 revisions behind. It'll take it 3 minutes. Like, reboot the machine. Do that with your phone. Do that with your work machine. Do that with your personal machine. Patch your stuff. Number 3 is password sharing. There's a temptation when, like me, if your work machine is right next to your personal machine in your office, it may be easy to start conflating when you're doing password changes, just using some of the same passwords between your personal and your work accounts. Don't do it. Keep them separate. Use a password manager if need be. That's a great tool to track what passwords you're using, but make sure that you are changing, that you are keeping passwords different between different accounts, and especially between work and personal accounts. Why? Because attackers that steal your personal account creds from potatoforum.com or whatever may want to try to use those to access your work stuff. I don't know if potatoforum.com exists, but I'm going to go buy it if it doesn't after this call. Outside of that, I would say watch what you're doing on your work machine. It's a work machine, right? If you want to do personal browsing, do it from your personal machine. I recommend using on your home network, since most of us are connecting to the internet, using our work machines from a home network right now, using some kind of DNS filtering that Leo talked about. There's plenty of free options for users at home. So OpenDNS is now Umbrella, owned by Cisco, and you can use that for free at home. And you can basically set your home router's DNS to use that, and it'll filter access to malicious sites, some adult sites. You can also use Clean Browsing. Clean Browsing is another great alternative that was built by Daniel Sid, great security researcher. So there's a couple options out there for protecting your home network. And then finally, walk away from the PC every once in a while. Get away from screens, and I think that will help all of us make better decisions when we're using technology.
Let me just interject one there, Justin. It's also the concept of, I always harp on this concept, trust but verify. We're not working in an office anymore. You can't go to that person and say, hey, did you send me this email? You're not out of line to say, did you send a separate email to that person and say, did you actually send me this email, or send them an instant message or something like that, whatever instant messaging platform you're using. Trust and verify that the email that you got actually came from the person you think it came from.
And on that note, Ryan, we should tell folks, report stuff. You should have, hopefully, your security team should have provided you with an avenue to report suspicious or known malicious content, right? So if you got a phishing email and it's phishing, or you suspect it might be phishing, report it to the right folks in your security team and help them defend the network, right? You become their detection system, and it greatly improves the efficacy of their security monitoring and response efforts if you do that. So good point.
Yeah.
Thanks for stressing that, Justin, because that's something that we definitely want people to do. It's more difficult and work from home, and we're really relying on individuals to tell us when weird things are happening out there.
So, yeah, thank you for all of that. And since I'm responsible for security awareness for the company, I will be tapping you to write a intranet article for all of our employees. Thank you for volunteering.
I got nothing but time, Sis. Let's do it.
There you go. Okay. Next question. How is this pandemic impacting the major cloud providers from a security standpoint? Is there anything we should be concerned with? Brandon, or?
I'm going to throw that one to Brandon, Mr. Cloud. As we call him in the organization, Mr. Cloud.
Yeah, so one of the things we're seeing is, because there are supply chain restraints, this is in some cases kind of forcing the issue, or, having organizations run a more kind of quick race to the public cloud environment. So if there are restrictions around, getting hardware, procuring hardware inside your data centers, we actually have a few customers that are accelerating their go to the cloud, migration. As from a provider standpoint, the tools and the widgets exist to, have one of the terms is a well-architected framework from a public cloud environment. What we offer and what we try to get ahead of is really the planning aspect around really a security-first strategy that is not just about infrastructure. It's about every aspect of how you're operating inside the public cloud. There's really an application-focused view. And we have a team of experts that are far more knowledgeable than myself. But this event will, drive more migrations to the cloud, right? Right now we're in times where, we're not sitting next to our compute or our storage or our data protection, whereas the public cloud providers, really provide those types of services. So, we will continue to see more and more. One of the stats that I thought was interesting, and I'll give the team here an opportunity to maybe speak to this too, is Gartner said by 2021, 99% of security-related failures in a public cloud environment are actually going to be caused actually by the individuals that, the customers of the cloud. Meaning the controls are there. However, if you're not, properly implementing them, if you don't have good, compliance and reporting, understanding change, understanding who can change what, then you very quickly can be in a very, bad situation, a compromised situation. Justin or Mohit or Leo, any other comments on that?
Yeah, I would say, as Mohit, one of the things that I'm seeing is scalability. So if you look at either it's a unified communication or any of the application that you're hosting in the cloud, first of all, the cloud providers go through a very, very strict security audit. It's nearly impossible. I've gone through a couple of them, and I'm seeing more and more after this. I think starting this year, what some new standards they have offered. So one of the challenges I'm seeing is the scalability on this application. So at least three clients that I'm working with and working with Cbts is established cloud practice and scalability. If you want to have remote people, their machines up and running, the patched up and everything, I think there's a good insight into making sure that you secure, because the standards these cloud providers, we are one of them, are up to the speed, and also scalability that you're going to ramp up fairly quickly for the services you're looking for. So it can be replicated very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, this is Leo.
Right.
I think the cloud is holding up pretty well. Given even the infrastructure that is managing security, we haven't really seen any glitches. There has been a little bit here and there, but nothing that has disrupted people's usage of the cloud. And I'm talking about the big cloud providers: Salesforce, Office 365, Amazon, Google, Cisco, et cetera, et cetera.
It's pretty solid. Leo's very, very solid. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of lapses like in a hybrid situation or on-premise, but cloud is proving to be a real good, becoming a backbone in terms of providing services. And again, scalability, that there are hundreds of people going remote and working from home. How do you scale and securely? So they're holding it pretty good.
All right. So we have one last question. What are your thoughts on machines returning to the network? Would you recommend re-imaging all machines that left the network that are returning? You mentioned that EDR is a visibility tool we use. Should we re-image as best practice or let it rejoin if EDR hasn't detected anything? And that one's directed to Justin.
Yeah. I like the idea on paper, right? So it's one of those, if you can pull that off culturally in your organization, I know I'd look to Leo and wonder if you tried to do that around here, if you would get a full-on revolt. My guess, I bet I'd know the answer.
Well, I think more importantly, it will cost a lot of money to re-image machines and move data around and ensure that you do all those steps. So I would say that if you have a good solid process in place where you have confidence in the endpoint security out there, then returning to home or from home should be very simple. And we do that today. I mean, people work from home today. They take the machines home and they come in and we don't re-image them. So I would say that if you have a low level of confidence in the security state of that endpoint, if it's out there in the field getting battle tested, then I think it's something that you could consider. But it's a long road and it's expensive.
Yeah, and hopefully you trust your endpoint protection stack, to Leo's point. If you don't, there's another issue that's probably larger and more significant that re-imaging is not going to solve. I think the big worry about our machines getting infected with malware on while they're on the home network is a valid one, but I think users will likely see the impact of that because there is still some insidious quiet malware out there. Most of the commodity stuff that we're seeing broadly infect personal machines is ransomware, and when that stuff's on your machine. So I think you got to trust your endpoint security stack, and if culturally you can pull it off, maybe for high-risk users or folks that have elevated privileges in the environment, it's something to think about. But at the same time, I think Leo's right. There's another cost to weigh there that isn't necessarily going to have anything to do with the risk.
Hey, can I throw in a point there? I want to caution against thinking of these machines that have been taken home as off your network. They're not. They're still connecting to your VPN. They're still holding your company's data potentially. You need to make sure those systems have all those protections in place already, so that you have your EDR in place, you have your other endpoint protection mechanisms in place, so that you don't really have to think that you have to re-image the machine when it comes back, quote, onto your network.
All right, thank you. We are out of questions, so I think we'll start to wrap up here. I want to give each of the panelists just a second if you have any final thoughts that you'd want to share with the group here. And Moby, I'll start with you. Do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yep, absolutely. A few things. I mean, make sure that your teams, there is a process where your teams working from home are well aware of impending scams. So any scams going around, either it's from IRS, CRA, healthcare, that one of your relatives is sick, validate. I think Brandon, or I don't know who said it, trust but verify, Ronald Reagan. You need to verify, you need to educate the teams. Reinforcing security training, even if it's like a 2-minute burp. Again, monitoring, make sure your security patches, whatever tools you have in place are all up to date, and people actually know how to use them, and if they don't, who to contact, the coordination, establishing the whole process for how they're going to work. And I mean, we have doctors, we have nurses, we have people who are so inundated and tired, but also using technology from home, telemedicine, trying to help while they're off, while they're sleeping and just taking 2-hour nap. So these things become very critical no matter which business supply chain you are at, that these imperatives needs to be in place.
Thank you, and thank you, Moby, for joining today. Brian?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that. Make sure you maintain visibility into the devices that are out there in the homes, as well as into your environment. Moby said earlier, 24/7 detection capability, visibility capabilities, very important in this time. And again, thank you all for your time.
Justin Hall.
Use multi-factor authentication. Wash your hands. Thanks.
Leo.
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to say, those that are out there that are running security operations teams, this is kind of a follow-on to Moby. I think those folks may be under stress, so I think it's important that you keep communications open and that you really look for burnout, because in these types of scenarios, people sometimes can go down the rabbit hole and spend all their time, down in the basement, on their machine looking for threats. And people need to come up and get a breath of fresh air every once in a while. So making sure that your teams are fresh through this is very important. And thank you for joining the webinar.
Brandon, I'll let you wrap up, and then I have just a couple logistic things. So take it away.
Great. Yeah, I want to also, thank our panel here and thanks to everyone that's joining. I'll use a quote from our CEO, Lee Fox. It's really resonated with me. Just because we're working from home does not mean that we should be working 24 hours a day. Take care of yourselves. Take breaks. Try to get yourself in the sun somehow, socially distant, of course. But I really appreciate everyone's time, and my hope is that, we stay healthy and we get through this, and hopefully someday we'll actually physically be able to see one another again, so I look forward to that, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Brandon. And thanks, everyone, for joining. We will have a replay of the event on our YouTube page by the end of the week, and we'll notify you via social media when it's available. So make sure you follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thanks, everyone.